All right. Before we start this lesson, this is one that I think I talked to you guys about, or I know I mentioned, but this is one of them that you did not get in Algebra 1. So far, a lot of the things we've done and everything in Chapter 4 is all stuff that you've had before in Algebra 1. We just need to make sure we brush up on it, make sure we're pretty sharp with that. This is one of the first. This is the first thing in this chapter. There's been a couple new things this year. This is definitely a big one that you did not do this in Algebra 1. Now, I probably wrote this in here. But the biggest thing with this, I personally, these are certainly not easy at all. That is not what I'm going to say at all. But I think a lot of students make up this. I don't think the math is that bad. I think the reason students don't do very well is because these problems take a long time and they're down so they don't stay organized. Sometimes students either get tired of it or they start going quickly or they start skipping steps or taking shortcuts. All that stuff, these are the type of problems that it's if you miss one negative somewhere, it throws off the whole problem and makes it a huge thing. So take your time, make sure this is the teach throughout the years. I think I wouldn't say I've nailed it like for everybody. I think I've done a pretty good job breaking it down to make it as easy as I think it can be, or at least to stay organized. That's probably the biggest thing. So yeah, just like I said in that little first paragraph, overall the problem is pretty difficult. Again, I think these are either 3, maybe 4 points on your test. So the whole problem itself is a very hard problem. But if you look at each step individually, it's really not a bit more, but not a lot. Stay organized, take your time. That's the big thing. So here's some tips. Now, I will say the steps I give you, there's 4 steps that I have to solving these. Per you have to do these. If you want to do it some other way, that's fine. You have to show your work, though. There is a way you can do it in your calculator if you're interested in that. I'm going to talk about that at the end if we have time. But I need, if you want to do it in your calculator to check your work, that's fine, but I need to see your work. You can't just do the whole thing in your calculator. Recommendations. Your A, B, C, I'm also going to use D, E. So if you label your equations, when I first taught this, I didn't do that. Where I'm using things, what I'm doing to them, so that was a big breakthrough when I decided to start doing that. Try to take some time to check all your negatives. That's a big thing. One of the biggest things that happens, that's a mistake. Someone accidentally has a negative instead of a positive, or somebody accidentally multiplies the whole equation by 2 except for one number, or something like that. Write your equations for every step. I know when you have a 2 by 2, the ones we've been doing, I know some of you guys don't rewrite the whole equation. That's okay, but for this stuff, it's definitely going to help you. It's going to get really messy if you try not to write things down. And that's like I said earlier, where some students, they try to do as much as they can without rewriting things. That's going to hurt you in these problems. Give yourself a lot of space. Try to give you about half a page for this. A lot of when I do problems like this, I end up using a whole page. Basically, use lots of space. If you need extra paper, feel free to get extra paper. Just staple all your work to your test or your quiz. Don't take any shortcuts. Talk about that. Show as much work as you can. Do the 4.4 worksheet. So I know a lot of you guys kind of blow off the worksheet. That is on you guys. If you feel prepared enough, you don't have to do the worksheet. That's up to you. But this is definitely one of those things that it takes practice to be able to get pretty good at this or to get comfortable with it. So for a lot of you, you guys need that extra practice. If you want to bring your teacher's problems, just make them go a little bit smoother. Don't do drugs until you can prevent forest fires. Those are the key things to this lesson. Not the last lesson, specifically this lesson. See, it's supposed to be a joke. It's okay. You don't have to laugh. I get it. Okay, so these are honestly one of the reasons I like this lesson is because they're doing a lot of bells and whistles. Normally I do, all right, read this type of problem, and then you do a couple. Then I do this type of problem, and then you do a couple. Then I do this type. It's not that way. This is the order you're doing today. They're all basically the same. There's a couple that are a little harder, a couple. So there are 4 steps to these, and honestly, a 4th step, I mean, you do it, but I actually label all my steps when I do this. So the first thing, and I guess I should scroll down, this is what your problems look like. We have 3 equations instead of 2, and we have 3 variables instead of 2. Now, obviously, they can be A, B, C, they can be X, Y, Z, they can be G, T, M. It doesn't matter what the variables are, as long as there's 3 of them and 3 variables. You want to label all of your equations. I label them A, B, and C every time. And try to stay consistent with my colors. So I label those A, B, and C. And again, I actually label out my steps 1, 2, and 3 because I think that helps a lot. So that's the first thing I do. That's not even a step on here. That's just what I label A, B, and C. Now, you're going to pick 2 equations that when you add them together, you get one of your variables to cancel. One of our equations, and we're using elimination just like we did before. Here's the beauty of it. It doesn't matter which variables you pick or which 2 equations you pick. This part, step 1, you've got a lot of freedom. If you look at first and your last equation, you add those together, your X is canceled. If you by -1, get your Y's to cancel. That's fine. If you were to take your first and third equation and multiply the bottom one by -2 to get your Z's to cancel, there's a bunch of possibilities you can use for that. Or personally, I usually try to find one of the variables all by itself. We have a Z by itself, a Y in it. So again, you kind of have some open range. I try to pick one where the variable is all by itself because that's a pretty easy way to get other things to cancel. And C multiply by anything, not a negative, not a 2 or a 3. So I'm going to pick A and C. So I rewrite this. Down my A, and then rewrite my equation. X plus Y plus 2Z is equal to my equation C is the other one I use. So I have -X minus Y plus Z is equal to 10. I add those together. My X's cancel. This is the same before. Y minus 2Y is -1Y. 2Z plus Z is 3, and 3 and 10 is 13. This is one of the steps that I'm going to tell you, or one of the hints I'm going to give you. You don't have to do it, but I label this other equation D. To help you stay organized, but that also helps you, especially with your notes. Like I've had students that they label everything, but on the test they don't. That's fine, but on the notes, at least you know where I'm getting these equations, because that's, again, one of the things students get confused with is they'll start wondering, so where did I get this equation? Where did that one come from? Well, now you know it came from this one. So step 1, again, step 1, you have a lot of freedom. Doesn't matter which equations you use, which 2 equations, doesn't matter which variable you pick. So far, so good? Okay, that's it. I'm just kidding. We have a lot more to do. Buckle up. Step 2, take the equation you didn't use. So there's one equation we didn't use so far. That's equation B. Step 1, we have some freedom. Step 2, have a little bit more constraints. We need to use the one equation we have so far. And the second thing you have to do, and this is the most common mistake that a lot of people make, so listen to this one carefully. Step 2, you have to cancel the same variable you did before. That's the biggest thing that people miss. The biggest thing people miss is they say, okay, you have to use equation B, and so equation B applies. A lot of students do that. You cannot. Whatever you pick to do in your first equation, you have to do in your second equation. One of the reasons I always pick a variable in my first step I always pick that, or I try to pick a variable that doesn't have a number in front of it at all, because it's easy to cancel the second step as well. You don't have to. And honestly, I didn't do it on your worksheet, but on your practice test, I did the equation 3 different times where I canceled the different thing every time first. So we need to use equation B, and we need to cancel our x's. So it doesn't matter if you use equation A or C, that part doesn't matter, but we have to use equation B, we have to cancel our x's. So I personally am going to do B and C. The other reason is because C has a negative x, so I don't have to multiply by a negative. But if you want to use A and B, like I said, it doesn't, you'll get the same answer. So I write down to my equation B is 2x plus y plus 3z is equal to 7. I want to cancel the x's. I need to multiply that equation C by 2. So this is the other thing I started doing a couple years ago. I put my C down, label that, but I put a 2 in front of it, which 2 multiplied by C. So that is negative 2x minus 4 plus 2z, even that 10, just like we did before, by 2. This is a really good place to just double check really quickly. It's a pain, and you guys aren't going to do this, that's fine. But just make sure you have your negatives and positives correct. I multiply everything by 2, so I should have a negative, a positive, so the negative is good. Again, just a quick way to double check that. Then we add my x's cancel. We needed that to happen, and I'll tell you why in a second. We get negative 3y plus 5z is equal to 27. Elimination. There's one extra variable, but it's the same thing we did before. And again, as you can imagine, label that equation E. So that's step 2. Again, the biggest thing with step 2, make sure you're canceling the same variable you did in step 1. The 2 big things, make sure you use the one equation you haven't used so far. You need to use that third equation. But again, you have to, the most common mistake, a lot of people don't cancel that same variable you did in step 1. So step 3 then, use elimination just like we've always done. And you're going to cancel one of the variables in equation D and E. So now we're looking at those 2 new equations we have, D and E. We're going to combine those and get one of your variables to cancel. So if we look, negative y plus 3z, and we have negative 3y and 5. So I'm going to, and again, it doesn't matter, cancel your y's or your z's. I'm going to cancel my y's. Because if I get D, if I multiply that by negative 3, then I could get a positive 3y and a negative 3y, and they cancel really nicely. I'm going to do that. So again, as you guys can imagine, equation D, I'm multiplying by negative 3, sorry, positive 3y minus 9z is equal to 3 times 13 is 39, I think. Negative 39. Since I just multiplied by a negative, it's positive, turn it into a negative, that should turn into a negative. So that, at least your signs are good. Combine that with my equation. Negative 3, I didn't do anything with this equation. 5z is equal to 27. We've done before. Now we can go ahead and start canceling things. So let's cancel. Plus 5. Negative 39 plus 27 is negative 12. Divide that by 4. You get z is equal to negative 3. Now, we're not done yet. It's done. I'm not saying the rest of it's easy, but the hardest part's done. Whatever you say. Yes, absolutely. And that's exactly good. That's a very good point where I missed this. If you miss something like that, you could look at this question for 10 minutes and never catch that mistake. I've had these where I can't figure out what I did wrong, and I literally have to end up getting a separate sheet of paper and doing it all over again, just looking at it with fresh eyes before I catch any of those. So once you have your first variable, that's the biggest challenge. Now, once you have your first variable, we're going to plug things in to find our second or third variable, just like we did before. Now, the good news is, one variable, our second variable, we have two other equations now that we've made. Two variables, so we know one of them, we can solve for the other one. So look at your equations D and E. Whichever one you want to use, I'm going to plug in positive 3 for my for my Z. So I'm going to go with my equation D. So I'm going to take my equation D. And y plus 3 times my Z is positive 4 is equal to 13. Nope, positive. Sorry, Z is 3, not 4. Just double checking. And then we solve for y. Surgery, you guys have done this 1,000 times already. 3 times 3 is 9. Subtract 9 and get negative y is equal to 13 minus 9. It's 4. That's one of those things you should know as a math teacher, but divide by negative 1. I end up getting my y is equal to negative 4. So you have your z, you have your y, now all you need is x. This is where you go all the way back to your very first equations. We know two variables, so we can find that third one. Pick whichever one you want. Personally, I try to figure out what variable I need. So again, I try to pick one where the x is by itself if I can. You can't go A. Sorry not to zoom out and mess this up, but hopefully I can. Jeez. For lack of a better place, I would put it wherever it makes sense, but I'm going to do it. Doesn't make sense up here. So my equation A, I have x plus negative 4 plus 2 times 3 is equal to 3. That's x minus 4 plus 6 is equal to 3. That's x plus 2 is equal to 3. You subtract 2 on both sides, you get x is equal to 1. So you got your x, your y, your z. Now, just like we did before when we put it as an ordered pair, to do this, but multiple choice is going to be like this. Your homework text is going to be like this today. We put it as what they call an ordered triple instead of an ordered pair. It just goes in alphabetical order. So x and y, just like before. Now the only difference is we have a z at the end. So 1, negative 4, 3. Problems are. So again, a lot of you, not everybody, but a lot of you are going to be able to look at this and be like, yeah, that wasn't too bad. Step 1 wasn't too bad. Step 2 wasn't a lot of work. Step 3 wasn't that bad. It's just that there's a lot of those steps. Like I said, these problems take a while. There's a lot of work with these. Like I said, even when I do these, I still label my step 1, step 2, and step 3. Step 4, I'm a little bit, hit and miss on that one. But if you label those steps, I think it definitely helps. So I'm going to have you guys go ahead and do this one on your own. I know I only did one example, but like I said, the hard part of this, in my opinion, is getting the practice. Because I think, especially when I walk through it with you, it makes a lot of sense to people. But then to do it on your own, it's a little bit shaky. Go ahead and do this one on a couple more after this and get some practice. And I'll put up the answer here in not too long. I'm obviously not done yet, but those are my steps 1 and 2. If you want to double check your work, if you're not done yet, not a bad idea just to make sure you're on the right track. Again, if your answers are different, double check to see if you use these same equations. Because for my step 2, I used B and C. If you used A and C, it is going to be a little bit different. So, and I'll put up the next couple steps in a second. Variable to be 0. Again, I hopefully am not interrupting or distracting you too much. I ended up getting 30 and negative 30, and those, again, it's not a no solution or anything because your variables can cancel. 30 minus 30 is just 0. So I ended up getting y equal to 0, and now you'll sub that back in for step 4. All right, only see half of my work right now, but that's what I got for this one. If you got something different, actually, give me one quick second. I can double check. All right, so that should be correct. Any questions before we move on? Hoping you guys can see where I'm coming from. Where yes, this is not easy at all. In my opinion, this is the hardest stuff we've done here. But every single step is just another elimination problem. There's just a lot of steps to this. Is everyone good? Not too bad? Okay. So the only other thing, I more challenging. I would actually say maybe it's easier. It's just a little bit more to remember in different places. The math is easier, but yeah, remember this. If you ever have missing variables, you need to put a 0 in there. You need a placeholder for that. You could do it without doing that, but again, it's a little bit, I think it's a lot easier to visualize. It's a lot easier to make sure things are where they need to be. So if I look at this one, I label my B and C. Variables. So that's totally good. So I'm rewriting that up here. 2x plus 3y minus 2z is equal to negative 1. Again, technically you didn't have to rewrite that. That's up to you. I just like to keep everything where it needs, like in nice orderly. I like to keep everything in the same place. B very. So we do everything the same as usual. X plus 5y in there plus 0 is equal to 9. Now, again, you have to do that? No, not at all. You don't have to. I know some people that just leave an empty space there. That's fine, too. If you rewrite it with an empty space, that's also great. But if you don't rewrite it, it's very hard to visualize and look at. If you look at that as a challenge, by all means, good luck. But I would not recommend it, especially if you're struggling. The next one, again, same thing. We don't have a y value, so I need to put a 0y in there. Now we have all of our equations, the x, y's, and z's. We have everything put in there. We have everything we need to be. Now, and this one is important. So yeah, first put zeros in for any missing variables. If you want to skip that, if you are good enough and you are comfortable with it, by all means, that is up to you. I would recommend it, but most people don't listen to me anyways. However, step 1 is a requirement. Step 1, you have to cancel the same variable in step 1, or sorry, you have to cancel the variable that's in all of them. So you do not want to cancel the y values, the y variable, because equation C does not have a y. So don't cancel the y's. You can't cancel the z values because all of them don't have a z. Equation B does not have a z. So for this one, you have to cancel the x's. Now again, it's not always going to be a requirement which one you do. You just can't do one of them that's not in all the variables or all the equations. If you don't know why that is, I would love to go over it if I had time, but I don't think it'd help you, and I think it'd confuse people. But if you're curious, try to do it another way. Try to cancel the z's first in step 1 and 2, and you'll see that it doesn't work out the way you would like it to. So we have to cancel our x's first. So the first part, not too much different. I'm going to cancel, I'm going to use A and B to cancel my x's. So on A, I'm not going to change it all. 2x plus 3y minus 2z is equal to negative 1. My B equation, I need to multiply by negative 2. 2x minus 10y. Negative 2 times 0 is just 0. So that's still 0z. That is negative 7y minus 2z is equal to 8. Again, we had to cancel the x's in that first step. Oh, nope, no worries. I'm glad you told me. And that's, again, a double-edged sword with this. If you make a silly mistake like I just did in step 1, it's going to be a disaster, the whole rest of the problem. So, again, you just have to go slowly. Step 1, we had to cancel the x's. It's in every single one. Step 2, now it's the same thing as we've done before. We're step 2, we have to cancel the same variable as we did in step 1. So, since we cancel the x's, we have to cancel the x's again. So I'm going to multiply my b equation by 5. X plus 25y plus 0z. Make sure you multiply the number. Some people do that, and it's crazy. You wouldn't believe it. You see, because I just did that. It's the joke. Never mind. It just wasn't funny. And then in C, again, in C, we just rewrite the equation. Negative 5x plus 0y plus 4z is equal to 4. And we add those together. Now, it's kind of nice. This one's pretty easy to add together. The x's cancel. We have 25y. The 0 plus 4 is just 4, so that's not bad. And then 45 and 4 is 49. That's my equation E. Once you get to that step, now the rest of it's the exact same. Step 3, but I'm going to skip step 4 to make sure we have time to go on the last one. The last one's quicker, but I want to make sure we have time. So now look at your equation D, your equation E. Just like we said before, we need to cancel a variable. It looks like the Z is going to be the easiest one to do. So I'm going to take my equation D and multiply by 2. So that's negative 14y minus 4z is equal to negative 38. Equation E, I don't have to do anything. Y plus 4z. When I put those together, is 11. 8 plus 49 is 11. Equal to 1. Once you have that, there's a couple other things you can do because there's those zeros at the beginning. Those are those equations that didn't have variables. There's a couple other things you could do. I wouldn't worry about it. I would do the same way we've done all the other problems because you can still do it that way and line it's good. Okay. And that's really the only difference is making sure you put those 0 placeholders in because that helps. But make sure you cancel the variable that is in every single equation. If one of the equations doesn't have that variable, it's not going to be a good time. Okay, the last one we have is always one I'm confused with, and some students leave this blank, and I promise you it is the easiest one we have. And this is why it's the easiest one we have. If you look at every other problem we did, look at all this work we've done. Step 1, step 2, and step 3, we did all those steps just to finally get one of our variables. We don't have to do all those steps because they're telling us one of our variables. They're telling us z is equal to 2. So this equation, since it's all by itself, since it only has one variable, I already know one of them. So I already know part of my answer is that z is equal to 2. So again, we're really starting at step 3. Once we know z is equal to 2, I plug that back into the other equation to find out what my x or y is. I need to plug it into the equation that only has 2 variables. Now, yes, there is a possibility that these other 2 will both have 3 variables, and you'll have to use elimination. I'm not going to give you any of those. If you got it on the test, it's going to look like this. I'm going to try to get every variation of this. It's going to be a nightmare, so this is one I choose. So take that 2 and plug it into your equation, if you label it. Your equation b, y plus 2 times 2 is equal to 0. Subtract 4 from my sides. So now my y, just like we normally do in step 4. Now that you have your z and your y, plug it into that third equation so you can find your x. So I have x plus 2 times -4 plus 3 times 2 is equal to 6. And then again, now just solve this one for x. That's x, -8 plus 6 is -2. Add 2 to both sides, you get x is equal to 8. Please, if I were you, highly recommended, I would do the worksheet on this. I know it'll take a while, and I think there's only 4 questions on it. I did not kill you with these, but getting the practice definitely will help you with this. Even if you feel like you understand you're pretty good, once you do 3 or 4 of them on your own, it really solidifies, it really starts getting pretty quick. It gets to be not too bad. Now, the last thing I'll say, and I honestly don't know if you guys will do this, it's up to you. But if you're curious, and you can only do this in this class, you can only do it to check your work. But if you want to make sure you get the right answer on these, if you want to know how to do this in your calculator, if you want to Google, I would do 3x3 systems with matrix. There's something called a matrix or a matrice. You can plug these in. If you want to Google that or look it up on YouTube, I would use whatever calculator you have, or if you're using mine, I would Google that. So for me, I would say I would 3x3 system with a matrix TI-84 plus. Because that's what calculator I have. Those are Casio, something dark side. I don't know what those are. But if you YouTube that, you'll find a tutorial on how to do that. Now again, you can do that to check your work. If you have the right answer, 2, -4, 8, but you don't have any work down, I'm not giving you any points. This is way too much work to not have anything shown. But it's always nice to have that reassurance that you know what the answer is, you know you got the right answer, and you didn't make any silly mistakes. Don't forget, there is a homework check on this. Make sure you take some time to do that. If you have any questions, let me know. But again, one of the biggest things with this is a lot of students, it makes sense when I go through it with them, but then to do it on their own, they start to struggle, and that's going to be on the test. So make sure when you struggle on your own, make sure that's on the worksheet, not on the test.